Jax's revenge domain. Your presentation's not needed. Spencer's got it covered. That's what Richard Caldwell said right outside the glass conference room 5 minutes before I was supposed to walk in and deliver the Q3 defense contract review. He didn't even look me in the eye, just tapped the folder in my hands like it was yesterday's newspaper and waved me off with that corporate smile. Inside, through the glass, I saw Spencer already standing at the screen, gesturing like he'd built our entire manufacturing operation from scratch. Like those slides weren't compiled from my inspections, my quality checks, my late-night safety validations. I'm Harold Morrison, 48 years old, and I'd been Chief Operations Manager at Stronghold Defense Solutions for 15 years. 15 years of building that place up from a small-time contractor to a major defense supplier. I didn't move for a second, just stood there invisible. I designed the whole quality control system they were presenting, every safety protocol, every efficiency metric, every compliance standard. My processes kept us in good standing with the Pentagon, but apparently I wasn't the guy they wanted in the spotlight anymore. I turned and walked back to my office, folder still in hand, didn't slam it down, didn't curse under my breath, just opened my laptop and went back to reviewing the weekend production reports like nothing had happened. 15 years. 15 years of building that operation up from post-merger chaos when Stronghold bought out 3 smaller contractors back in 2009. I'd been hired right after my discharge from the Army. 20 years in logistics and supply chain management, most of it overseas, keeping equipment flowing to forward operating bases where delays meant lives lost. You learn fast in that environment. No room for mistakes, no tolerance for half measures. When a convoy needs parts and you've got 72 hours to get them through 3 countries and 2 war zones, you figure out what works and what doesn't. That mindset served me well in civilian defense contracting. Richard Caldwell needed someone who understood military standards when he hired me. Back then, our quality ratings were barely passing DoD requirements, and half our equipment was running on outdated protocols from the early 2000s. I rebuilt it all. Every inspection process, every safety standard, every delivery timeline. Applied the same attention to detail I'd used coordinating supply lines in Afghanistan. We went from 78% on-time delivery to 92% in under 3 years, and our defect rate dropped to less than 0.2%. Never asked for a fancy title, never pushed for executive perks. My office was a converted storage room next to the production floor. No windows, no mahogany desk, just my computer, a whiteboard, and a chair that squeaked when I leaned back. But whenever a contract got threatened, when an inspector showed up unannounced, or when a supplier screwed up a critical component, Richard called me. I fixed it quietly, efficiently, the way the military taught me. Then Spencer Caldwell showed up 18 months ago. He was Richard's son, but nobody said it out loud at first. They didn't need to. You could see it in how he carried himself, that entitled confidence that comes from knowing you're untouchable. Fresh MBA from Wharton, resume that looked good on paper but had zero real-world experience. His ideas came wrapped in buzzwords and ended in PowerPoint slides that said nothing. But people played along. At first, he shadowed different departments, learning the business, they said. Finance, procurement, quality assurance. But by month 2, he was following me around, sitting in on vendor meetings, asking to be copied on inspection reports. Once he suggested we switch to a fully automated quality system, without understanding that defense contracts require human verification at multiple stages, like suggesting we replace field commanders with algorithms. Still, I answered his questions, showed him the ropes, wasn't afraid of being replaced because nobody could just step into what I did. The relationships with inspectors, the knowledge of which suppliers could be trusted under pressure, the ability to spot a potential failure 3 months before it became a crisis. That stuff takes years to build, like earning trust from locals in a combat zone. But then the whispers started. First from Patricia Stone in HR. They're restructuring, flattening management layers, she said. Then from George Walsh in compliance. Spencer's name is already on the new org chart draft. Same day, HR asked me to update my job description for internal review. I'd seen this playbook before, the slow squeeze. But I wasn't worried. Not really. Because 15 years ago, when Richard was desperate to land me after my Army discharge, I'd negotiated something nobody bothered to read carefully. Buried in my employment contract was a clause I'd written myself, hidden between vacation policies and health benefits under a section called Management Transition and Departure Rights. If they moved me from direct operational control or reassigned my responsibilities without written consent, I could resign immediately with full stock option vesting, deferred compensation acceleration, and performance bonuses calculated on our 5-year efficiency gains. They never read the fine print, too busy planning Spencer's rise through the ranks. So I waited, watched him take meetings he couldn't handle, watched him nod through concepts he didn't grasp, watched him get credit for improvements he didn't understand. And I smiled, because I knew exactly how this would end. In the military, we called it operational patience. Sometimes you wait for the right moment to execute your plan. The promotion announcement came on a Wednesday, slipped into everyone's inbox like a routine update. Please join us in welcoming Spencer Caldwell to his new role as Vice President of Operations. No mention of transition timeline. No acknowledgement of overlap. Just a new box on the organizational chart with mine pushed slightly to the side, connected by a thin dotted line like an afterthought. I read it once, then again. Felt nothing. Not anger, not betrayal, just the quiet satisfaction of a mechanism engaging exactly the way I'd designed it to. In the Army, we called it mission parameters met. The celebration lunch was scheduled for noon in the main conference room overlooking the production floor. Catered sandwiches, congratulatory cake, the whole show. I arrived on time, sat toward the back, and watched executives laugh at jokes that weren't funny. Spencer stood at the front, tie loosened, playing the part he'd been rehearsing for months. When the applause started, I stood with everyone else. He spotted me immediately, and his smile tightened just a bit. I waited until he looked directly at me, then stepped forward, extended my hand, and said calmly, "Congratulations, Spencer." He gripped my hand like he'd just won something. "Thanks, Hal. Couldn't have done it without the team." I nodded. Of course, no sarcasm, no edge. Then I walked back to my office, opened a new document, and typed 3 paragraphs, printed 1 page, and signed my name at the bottom. The printer hummed softly as I walked down the hall to Richard's office. He smiled when he saw me approach. "Hal, we were just talking about transition planning. Please read this first," I said, handing him the letter. He glanced at the header. His smile stayed put. Then he read the first paragraph, and his eyebrows pulled together. By the time he reached the signature line, the color had started draining from his face. "What is this?" he asked, but his voice had gone thin. "My resignation," I said. He laughed once, sharp and confused. "Come on, you're not serious." "Page 2 shows the calculation," I replied. That's when he really understood. He sat down without meaning to, read it again, then flipped to the second page. The numbers were all there. Stock options vesting immediately, deferred compensation accelerating, performance bonuses calculated on our efficiency improvements over 5 years. With Stronghold's pre-IPO valuation, it added up to $4.8 million. "This can't be right," he said, reading it a third time. "It is," I said quietly. He looked up at me, eyes wide now. "The stock vesting, the performance multipliers, the acceleration schedule. Yes." He swallowed hard. "This triggers automatically?" "The moment Spencer was placed above me in the reporting structure," I said, "which happened this morning when you announced his promotion." Outside his office, the celebration continued. Someone clinked a glass. Spencer's voice carried, confident and unearned. Inside, the air had gone heavy. "You can't do this," Richard said, standing now. "Not like this." "I didn't," I replied. "You did." I watched the realization crawl across his face as he put the timeline together. My role reassigned, my authority diminished. The clause he'd signed off on 15 years ago without reading the details. He sank back into his chair. "Legal already approved this?" 15 years ago, I said. "You might want to call payroll. The clock started when you sent that promotion announcement." Then I walked out. No raised voice, no dramatic exit. Just a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. The panic started that afternoon. Richard tried to downplay it at first, called it a routine transition, told department heads I'd be around for handover. But when he called legal, that's where the facade cracked. I wasn't in the room, but George Walsh told me about it later. Richard read the clause out loud twice over the phone. Long silence on the other end. Finally, the senior counsel said flatly, "He wrote that clause himself and we signed it." Clause 7.3b, buried deep in an employment contract drafted 15 years ago when Richard needed me more than I needed him. At the time, I was one of the few people who understood both military procurement standards and civilian manufacturing efficiency. They couldn't afford to lose me, and I knew it. So I didn't negotiate for salary bumps or corner offices. I negotiated for leverage. The clause was written in legal language that looked standard but contained very specific triggers. Same way we wrote mission briefings in the Army, everything looked routine until you read the operational details. And the moment Spencer Caldwell was placed above me organizationally, it activated. Everything I'd built over 15 years, all the deferred compensation tied to our performance improvements, the stock options I'd accumulated, all of it matured instantly. The number on the final calculation, $4.8 million, fully vested, payable within 10 business days. Richard called the CFO next. 2 hours later, they were digging through old files marked original employment agreements. They found the contract, found the signature, found the date stamp. Legal tried to determine if there was any way to contest it. There wasn't. The clause included penalty interest for delayed payment, compounding daily. Every attempt to stall just cost them more. And I'd made sure to hand-deliver my resignation with a time-stamped receipt. Within 24 hours, the real problem started. Our main Pentagon contract had a clause I'd negotiated years earlier, based on military procurement protocols I understood from my Army days. If the chief operations manager was reassigned or departed, the contract required renegotiation within 30 days, or rates would revert to pre-agreement levels. That meant a 35% cost increase for Stronghold. The supplier agreements were even worse. Critical component vendors had clauses tied to my personal certification. Without my approval, they had to restart qualification processes that could take months. I'd learned this lesson coordinating with Afghan contractors, where personal relationships and verified credentials meant the difference between getting supplies or watching operations collapse. Spencer tried to step into the role, but he didn't have security clearance for half the contracts, didn't understand the inspection protocols, didn't know which suppliers could handle emergency orders and which ones would fold under pressure. The first major failure happened on a Thursday. Spencer approved a component batch that hadn't gone through proper testing. Not his fault, really. He just didn't know the difference between commercial-grade testing and military spec requirements. In the civilian world, you might get away with 99.5% reliability. In defense contracts, that 0.5% failure rate could mean a helicopter going down or a communications system failing in combat. I'd learned that lesson the hard way coordinating equipment drops in Kandahar, where one faulty radio could cost lives. The batch failed inspection spectacularly, not just a paperwork issue, but actual performance failure under stress testing. The components were rated for extreme temperatures, but Spencer had signed off on a supplier who cut corners on the temperature cycling process. When the Navy's quality assurance team put them through their paces, 12% failed within the first hour. That triggered a cascade I'd seen before in military logistics. One failure leads to delayed deliveries, which leads to penalty clauses, which leads to contract reviews. Within 48 hours, we had to halt production on a critical Navy destroyer communications upgrade, the kind of contract that keeps defense contractors in business. Spencer tried to blame the supplier, but the paperwork trail led straight back to his approval. He'd overridden my quality protocols without understanding what they were protecting against. Like a new lieutenant ignoring established patrol routes because they looked inefficient on a map, not realizing those routes avoided IED patterns that cost months of intel gathering to identify. By day 5, Atlas Manufacturing Group reached out. I'd worked with their CEO, Vincent Cross, on joint contracts before. Professional relationship built over years of delivering on time and under budget. He knew my reputation in the industry, knew what I could bring to an operation that valued experience over corporate politics. The offer was straightforward. Chief Strategic Officer, full equity package, complete operational authority, and most importantly, the freedom to build systems the right way from the start. No bureaucracy, no corporate politics, just results-driven manufacturing with clients who understood that quality costs less than failure. Vincent had served 2 Marines in Iraq, and he ran his company like a well-disciplined unit. Clear chain of command, defined objectives, accountability at every level. When he said they needed someone who could handle defense contracts without the drama, I knew he meant it. I signed on day 7. No press release, no LinkedIn announcement, just a quiet transition while strongholds scrambled to keep their contracts from collapsing. In military terms, I was repositioning to a better strategic position while the enemy dealt with self-inflicted casualties. The $4.8 million cleared on day 9. I didn't celebrate, didn't buy anything extravagant, just moved the money into diversified investments the way my Army financial advisor had taught me years ago. Long-term thinking, multiple income streams. Never put all your eggs in one basket because operations can go sideways fast. Meanwhile, Spencer's problems were multiplying. The Navy contract failure had triggered a broader review of our quality management systems. Inspectors were asking questions he couldn't answer about process validation, supplier certification, and statistical quality control. Questions I'd been handling for 15 years, but had never properly documented because Richard trusted me to just handle it. The supplier situation got worse when Spencer tried to renegotiate the failed component contract. Instead of working through the established process of corrective action and revalidation, he went straight to demanding refunds and threatening legal action. Classic mistake of someone who'd never managed supplier relationships under pressure. In Afghanistan, we learned fast that burning bridges with local contractors meant no backup options when your primary supply line got hit. Same principle applied here. The supplier, who'd been reliable for 8 years under my management, decided they didn't need the headache of working with inexperienced management. They pulled out entirely, taking with them the institutional knowledge of our specific requirements and quality standards. That left Spencer scrambling to find replacement suppliers in the middle of active contracts. New suppliers meant new qualification processes, new testing protocols, new documentation. Work that typically took 6 months to do properly, compressed into 6 weeks because delivery deadlines weren't negotiable. By week 3, Stronghold had lost the Navy contract entirely. Spencer couldn't provide the operational continuity guarantees required for defense work. The contract officer, a former Army logistics sergeant who knew quality when he saw it, wasn't impressed by MBA buzzwords and PowerPoint presentations. He wanted documentation, process validation, and proof of performance capability. Spencer had charts and graphs. He didn't have the underlying systems that made those numbers meaningful. 2 more suppliers suspended relationships pending recertification of quality standards. Word spreads fast in the defense contractor community. Suppliers talk to each other, share experiences about which companies are solid partners and which ones create problems. Spencer's approach of aggressive demands and inexperienced oversight had marked Stronghold as high maintenance, low reward. Richard tried calling me once during this period, left a voicemail saying they'd handled things poorly, asking if we could work something out. Maybe I could consult on the transition, help Spencer get up to speed, provide some continuity while they rebuilt their processes. I didn't return the call. My attorney sent a standard response. Per Employment Agreement Section 7.3b, all obligations concluded upon final payment. No additional services would be provided. The message was clear. I'd spent 15 years building systems that worked. They'd chosen to hand those systems to someone without the experience to maintain them. The consequences were predictable, and they weren't my problem to solve. Atlas, meanwhile, was moving fast on new opportunities. Vincent had been tracking Stronghold's contract troubles through industry contacts. When the Navy communications upgrade went back out for bid, Atlas was ready. We had the technical capability, the quality systems, and most importantly, the operational experience to deliver what the military needed. The proposal process was smooth, professional, efficient. Everything Strongholds had become complicated and uncertain. When you know what you're doing, complex requirements become manageable challenges instead of insurmountable obstacles. 6 months later, Stronghold was still trying to rebuild what I'd spent 15 years creating. Spencer had been quietly moved to business development, a role where his MBA buzzwords could do less damage to actual operations. They hired 3 people to replace me, none with defense experience, none with security clearances, none with the institutional knowledge that made the difference between meeting specs and exceeding them. The new operations team was learning the hard way that defense contracting isn't like manufacturing consumer products. You can't just optimize for cost and hope quality follows. Every component, every process, every supplier relationship has to be validated against standards that exist because failure in the field costs lives. It's the kind of lesson the military teaches you fast, but civilian managers sometimes take years to understand. Atlas, meanwhile, had landed the Navy communications contract plus 2 additional defense projects in our first quarter. Vincent ran the company like the Marine unit he'd commanded in Fallujah. Clear objectives, accountability at every level, and no tolerance for half measures. When government inspectors showed up, they found documentation that exceeded requirements, processes that delivered consistent quality, and a management team that understood what they were talking about. The Navy contract was particularly satisfying. Same specifications Stronghold had failed to meet, same tight deadlines, same demanding quality requirements. But with proper systems in place and experienced leadership, what had been impossible for Spencer became routine for us. We delivered 2 weeks early and 8% under budget, exactly the kind of performance that builds long-term relationships in defense contracting. Word spreads fast in our industry. Contract officers talk to each other, share information about which companies deliver and which ones create problems. Atlas's reputation for reliability and competence opened doors that took other companies years to access. Within 6 months, we were on preferred vendor lists for military contracts that Stronghold had been trying to win for the past 3 years. The turnaround reminded me of successful operations I'd coordinated in Afghanistan, where the difference between mission success and failure often came down to having the right people in the right positions with clear authority to execute. No amount of planning could substitute for experience, and no amount of enthusiasm could replace competence. Spencer's replacement at Stronghold, a retired Air Force colonel named Patricia Wells, was competent but faced an uphill battle. She inherited suppliers who'd lost confidence in the company, contracts under review due to quality failures, and a reputation that needed rebuilding from the ground up. Good leader, but even the best commander can't instantly repair damage caused by poor decisions and inexperienced management. I ran into Richard at an industry conference about 8 months after leaving Stronghold. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. The stress of rebuilding operations while managing declining contracts had taken its toll. He nodded when he saw me, professional but distant. "How's Atlas treating you?" he asked during a brief conversation between sessions. "Well," I said simply. "Vincent knows how to run an operation." Richard was quiet for a moment, then said, "I should have handled things differently. The transition, I mean." I didn't respond immediately. In the Army, we learned that some mistakes have consequences that can't be undone by apologies. You deal with the results and try to make better decisions next time. "Experience matters in this business," I finally said. "You know that." He nodded, understanding that. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt just by wanting them to be. The defense industry is small. Reputation travels fast, and results speak louder than marketing presentations. Atlas's success and Stronghold's struggles weren't secrets in our community. Other veterans in leadership positions took notice. Companies that valued proven performance over theoretical potential started reaching out. I never badmouthed Stronghold publicly, never posted on social media about corporate culture or revenge fantasies, never wrote angry reviews about management decisions, just focused on doing what I'd always done. Building systems that worked, delivering results that exceeded expectations, and maintaining the kind of professional standards that military service had taught me. The difference was that now I worked for a company that valued those qualities instead of taking them for granted. Vincent understood that operational excellence wasn't about buzzwords and presentation slides. It was about having the knowledge, experience, and judgment to make decisions that worked under pressure. Stronghold eventually stabilized under Patricia's leadership, but they never regained their position as a preferred contractor for high-level defense projects. The reputation damage from Spencer's tenure and the loss of institutional knowledge took years to overcome. Some supplier relationships were permanently damaged. Some contracts were lost to competitors who could demonstrate more reliable performance. Atlas, by contrast, continued growing steadily. We hired carefully, focusing on experience and cultural fit rather than impressive resumes without substance. The team Vincent assembled understood that defense work required different standards than commercial manufacturing: higher precision, better documentation, more rigorous testing, and absolute reliability when it mattered most. 2 years after leaving Stronghold, I received an Industry Achievement Award for contributions to defense manufacturing excellence. Vincent and I accepted it together on behalf of Atlas's entire team. The recognition felt good, not because of the award itself, but because it represented validation of the approach we'd built together. I'm not bitter about how things ended at Stronghold, not angry or resentful, just satisfied that everything worked out exactly as it should have. Experience and competence found their proper value. Poor decisions had their predictable consequences, and the industry benefited from having another company committed to delivering what the military actually needed instead of what looked good in PowerPoint presentations. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one with the most to say. Sometimes the person who doesn't make a lot of noise is the one holding everything together. And sometimes walking away from a situation that doesn't value what you bring is the best decision you can make. 15 years of planning, one signature, perfect execution. That's what real operational excellence looks like. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared for people to show you exactly who they are, and having a plan ready when they finally do. In the end, loyalty should be earned, not assumed, and the smartest contract you'll ever write is the one that protects you when others forget your worth.